Hello everyone, welcome back to What Is This Weapon? I'm Jonathan and this is the T148, or 148 I guess they would say in America, E1 multi-shot grenade launcher. 3-shot grenade launcher. That actually brings us to immediately a minor bit of myth busting in that the M79, the famous break open, blooper, thumper, whatever you want to call it, that was so successful through Vietnam, still around today as far as I know, keeps getting taken back into service when they realize they need a 40mm single-shot grenade launcher. It might now be dead, I'm not sure. Those of you in service in the States can let us know in the comments. But the M79, absolutely legendary. People tend to think that came first, the XM79, and then they went for multi-shot launchers. The most famous of which is the China Lake, so-called, pump action. But that wasn't sort of troop trialed until the Vietnam period. So about a decade later than this thing. So they were looking at multi-shot launches right from the start, and 3 shots was actually part of the requirement that led to this program. Now, around the time of the launch of this video, there is also an EXP Expert Reacts video with our friends at that channel, where this makes an appearance, a cameo. Please do check that out if it's already out, or eagerly anticipate it if it hasn't quite come out yet. We don't quite know when we're going to air this, but it shows up in there. And I wanted to hopefully line up with that a bit and give you the deep dive. I've been intending to do a video on this for a very long time, and then it pops up in a game, I won't reveal which, or a version of it does, the concept of it does at least. And I thought, right, I've got to go and give you the full story. Thanks also to Alex McKenzie at Springfield Armory Museum. Wonderful site, heritage site as a set of buildings, as a complex, but also, of course, great museum displays, amazing stuff in store. They have a number of these. These are not actually super rare. They're not unique. There's not 3 of them. There are more than that. But they are almost all at Springfield Armory Museum, because this was designed at the Springfield Armory site when it was a design, development, and manufacturing facility. So this was designed by a Lieutenant or Lieutenant Colonel Roy E. Rayle, an amazing name. He started at Springfield Armory in 1953, so that gives us our sort of bookend, first bookend for this story. And it was the infantry board at Fort Benning that put out this requirement for a 3-shot grenade launcher, and Rayle is responding to that. Tempting, therefore, to call it the Rayle gun, but we'll avoid that. And this weapon is mentioned, not by name, but it is covered in Rayle's own memoir entitled Random Shots, appropriately. Episodes in the life of a weapon developer. We'll give you the reference in the description, as we usually do. So he talks about this, but doesn't go into too much detail and doesn't give us the designation. The T prefix at the time being experimental in the American system, and then the E1, E2 suffix to show that it's rolling up. Changes to X by the time of the AR-15 rifle, but it's T at this point. Now, where I think people get confused with the M79 story is that the XM79, bit of a spoiler, gets fast-tracked into development while work is still ongoing on this. So the original requirements for 3 shots, this and the M79 effectively appear at the same time, and then this kind of simmers on the back burner while the easier to make, arguably better, M79 gets pushed forward as a priority. And that's, I think, why people have the impression that this appears later on. It doesn't. They are contemporary. Now, if you're thinking, well, why is there a 1953 period requirement for a 3-shot launcher? We haven't invented the 40mm launcher yet. Well, we have, actually. 1951, Project Niblick generates the high-low pressure 40mm round as a concept. They're now, a couple of years later, looking at how we actually project that. There's actually an amusing anecdote of the early testing for Project Niblick being done with golf balls. So they're on the Pentagon lawn shooting golf balls out of early grenade launchers. So actually, on that point of high-low pressure, this is actually a proof round, a German proof round from the 80s, but if we pop out the proof projectile, I can show you the interior. We're going to use this in a moment for another purpose, but so that's the case for the 40x46 round. It's a giant, almost like a giant pistol cartridge case, really, but obviously for launching an actual small grenade. And in there is a chamber. You can see the exterior of the chamber on the interior of the case. So that develops your normal high level of pressure, 30,000 psi roughly. and then that then bleeds into the outer case to punt the grenade or golf ball out of the case at about 3,000 psi. So that's that high-low pressure system. That's what allows you to, and this is bigger and heavier than it ought to be, but to chuck something of significant mass at a distance without breaking your shoulder, essentially. Quite an ingenious system, still in widespread use today, and this is still the standard light grenade round, or standard small arms grenade round, I suppose you would call it. Although the industry is now working on 25mm, 30mm, but one of the options for the precision grenadier system that the US military is looking at the moment is still the 40x46 round. So that's established by this point, but they kind of go immediately to, well, we'll look at a single shot launcher, but we'll also look at a 3-shot launcher. That they want that right away. Now, appropriately enough, because, well, especially the M79 with its break action, the sort of shotgun appearance of these launchers, the baseline that those figures, those pressure figures originate from, and the mass of the projectile, the caliber, all of that works backwards from a no greater recoil than a 12-gauge shotgun requirement. So they start with the human factor, as it were, the ergonomic factor of we need to not, I guess with buckshot, we don't want the user to experience any more recoil than they would from a 12-gauge shotgun. And that then dictates this high-low pressure system, the chamber pressures, the dual chamber pressures, and we go from there. So I think that's interesting. So I've said that the M79 is contemporary to this. Actually, the first 3 launchers that are created are this thing, a crude test fixture, bolted to a sled or something of that nature, and a single-shot pistol. So we're not actually going straight to the M79. We're almost foreshadowing the MACV-SOG pirate gun of an M79 with the barrel cut down and the buttstock cut off. So they're already thinking of this as a pistol, I guess inspired by flare guns, that kind of thing. But kind of crazy that they want no more recoil than a 12-gauge shotgun, but they're happy for you to shoot that one-handed. And needless to say, that doesn't actually go anywhere. So we get 2 more names at this point working on this project, both engineers, Cy Moore and Dave Katz. There's some very interesting names involved in this program, but they deserve credit for working up these different launchers. And they are joined by Rayle in 1953, as mentioned. So these 3 guys seem to be the main contributors. So this thing is 29.5 inches long. So similar overall length to the M79, similar handling characteristics. The weight is obviously more. Now, with the E2 model, they get that down a bit to 8.41 pounds is the figure. That's kind of, by modern standard, hefty rifle, like, I guess, normal rifle weight. So that figure, 8.41 pounds, that's for the E2 version. It's 8.5 pounds for the E1, and that's loaded. These three of these rounds would weigh a fair bit. It's 6.72 pounds unloaded. This feels a little heavier. We might double check that figure, but that's what they state. Certainly very manageable for a weapon of this capability, but it's still relatively hefty. It's bulkier, of course, than an M79, depending on where this is positioned, and we're coming to this system in just a moment. We have, so despite them being anodized different colors, we have an aluminium or aluminum barrel. Again, that low pressure system means you can have an aluminium barrel, though it doesn't need to have a steel liner. And again, aluminum or aluminium receiver as well. Obviously, standard walnut furniture on here. We have our M79 style sight here, so push button to stow it, and then again to flip it up. And that is marked to 315 yards, quite specific as a sort of maximum range. And so it's going up in, it starts at 50 yards at the bottom, and you can see you've got these curvatures here that are intended to align with the curvature of the muzzle itself, almost like aiming a musket. But then you have a slightly more precise notch in the middle, and they are graduated 50, 100, 150, 200, 250, but then we go to 275 before we get to 300, and then we top out at 315. That's a fair distance, and the whole point of these weapons, of course, M79 included, is to punt a grenade further than you can throw with your hand, and to do it in a better way than the traditional muzzle-launched rifle grenade. And, in theory, well, to give you more shots, either with the quick load of the M79 or with the onboard 3 rounds of this system. Also M79, or shared with that version of the program, is the Arctic trigger guard. So that's a plunger on the front there. Press that in and we can pivot our trigger guard out of the way so you can use it with gloves, mittens, and then we can pop that back into place. Rather than breaking open, because this thing slides, as you probably already guessed, we have a grip safety here. So it's a double action trigger, which doesn't do anything unless the grip safety is gripped. A little awkward for a grip safety, I would say, subjectively, but it's designed for your thumb to lay across and hold it down. I think you'd get used to it, but it is a chunky thing to wield. But there is a second manual safety here, rather like an SA-80 safety, funnily enough, which is a cross bolt type. So when it sticks out on the left, when you're ready to fire, there's an F on there. Fairly prominent, but not white or red or anything. And then pushing that across, which you'd probably do with your support hand, I think you'd have to, it then blocks the trigger, even when the grip safety is held, and you get an S for safety, or safe. Right where you would, well, I guess you can see either side, but where in line with your right eye, you go, oh no, I'm unsafe, and you can just push it across and shoot the thing. Now, double safety system, extra important when you're punting explosive golf balls downrange or potentially into the floor. Although you'll get a minimum arming distance, a bit like Call of Duty. Let's show you the markings, actually, before we move on. So we have Springfield Armory, where it was developed and made. Launcher, T148E1, T being the test prefix before they went to X for experimental. US, obviously, United States, and the serial on there is 168. That would normally be a high figure for something as rare as this, but they're producing quite a lot of prototypes for testing, let's put it that way. In front of that is a dovetail, on the E1 at least, and I will try and find a photo of the optic. They refer to it as a unity sight. Basically the same idea as the contemporary British unit sight, which is a fixed magnification, little mini telescopic sight that means you can get a single point of aim without having to line up front and rear sights, which is also true of this. This doesn't require a rear sight to work either, but they are sort of flirting with optical sights on grenade launchers in the mid-50s, which is interesting. That then leads us to the mechanism, which is kind of fascinating. So you will have seen this great big, now they call it a magazine. It doesn't have a spring on it or in it, so I tend to call it a clip. It's a feed device. And that's a block of aluminium again, with some steel inserts, steel extractors here. And it has this so-called negator spring, which is a coiled strip spring on the left side. And if I start to push that through the weapon, you'll see how it works. It unreels the spring. Now, it won't stay in place, and I can show you why. But that's what's driving it back through. So we start from sticking out to the left, and the game I alluded to that the EXP guys showed me, if I remember rightly, they've got this backwards because all of the images of these things show it that sticking out to the right. But if we were loaded, we would start from the left side. Now, to show you this properly, what I need to do is get it back into its empty position and press this catch underneath. So we press that down and out comes our so-called magazine. That gives us a slightly better view of the construction here. Quite a bit of machining involved, not excessive, but more than you might think. And so if I press that catch again, you'll see there's a stud there. That's what's holding the magazine in each of its positions. and it's a sort of cantilever lever, like a flat spring and a lever pushing the flat spring down, pulls that lug down and allows the thing to move to the next position, or in this case, out of the gun entirely. And there is your negator spring, which is just riveted in place on the bottom of the receiver and goes boing in a pleasing manner. And that also lets us see, of course we have rifling. Point this at the camera. You see we do have rifling in there, kind of necessary for the accuracy, of course. And oh, I suppose we can also just about see the firing pin aperture. But faster than the eye can see, or possibly the firing pin tip is broken, but the firing pin will fly out of that little hole, obviously, strike the conventional percussion primer on the back of the round and fire. So a self-contained double action mechanism. I'm not inclined to try to remove the stock to show you how that works in detail. We see the hammer, disconnector, and in there, we see the nose of the trigger. So we'll come around here, pull the trigger, back round, and we see it reconnect. So we can pull to cock it, and then I'll let go of the grip safety, and we have our safety mechanism. So how does that actually work in practice? Well, you need to look at the actual magazine. So we have these buttons here, very strong spring. Press that and the extractor will pop out. That allows you to load rounds, and we do that twice. Bit easier on that one. And if I take my fired case, let's put that in the end here. So we can push that in with its extractor and it will click in place. So we do that 3 times to fully load with live rounds, obviously, not empty cases. And so it's manual eject. In other words, you have to press this button in to fit the rim in to load the thing. And then when you've fired, so obviously a grenade round's gone that way, and we take our block out. Well, you could unload partially in the weapon, but to fully unload, you need to take it out. Regard it as a magazine. You then have to press this again. And it will eject with a bit of authority. And you can then, of course, reload your magazine system or clip system. Now, if I tell you this thing advances itself every time you fire it, you will immediately wonder, how does it achieve that? Well, on the bottom of each chamber is another lever, or to put it another way, there's a set of 3 levers on the bottom of this unit. And if we look inside each chamber, you'll see a little blade, effectively, a little rib, sticking up on the bottom of each of those. Might help if I put my finger there or give you a... But it's in there, and I can press down on that. That is spring-loaded because these are sprung levers. So when we load a complete round, and this is the M118, or an inert, I hasten to add. When we load a complete round into there, what happens is with just the case in there, that lever is popped up. With a complete round in there, the actual body of the grenade presses that lever down, which presses, as you can possibly see, well, it's pressed down. So it's engaging with the body. And then when you fire it, grenade goes flying, lever pops up, and the whole unit's free to shift to the next position. So we can demonstrate that for you in the gun artificially, because the only way to demonstrate it really would be to fire live rounds from this thing. Fairly easy to load. So we will pretend that the round is in there pressing down on that little lever, locking this in place fully to the left. We depress our grip safety, we activate our manual safety, we pull the trigger and fire a round. Bloop. Case is left behind, obviously, but the lever pops up, which means it ka-chunks to, and I've overshot, but to the middle position. Fire the next round, it automatically, and it is a bit weak now, but ka-chunks to the final position. So it's described in the records as semi-automatic, and I guess technically it is, because we're not... the striker mechanism is manually operated with the double action trigger, but the actual feed mechanism is not manually operated. It does occur automatically. So it's a form of semi-automatic fire. And again, when it reaches the end of travel, you just press that, pull it out, reload it, or actually realistically, you grab another clip of 3 rounds, slap that in all the way to the end, and you repeat. Really quite a clever system, but it does rely rather on that spring tension, and this old girl is a little bit slow on the operation because I guess the spring tension is lacking. There isn't really any other mechanism here that you could improve. Actually, while I remember, there is no recoil pad on this one. This just has a butt plate. Again, aluminium, ribbed butt plate so it doesn't slip, standard rifle stuff. There are E1s, or at least that one E1 in the Springfield Armory collection with a rubber recoil pad on there, which is interesting. Which I guess brings me to the T148E2, which seems to, I guess, by default had a recoil pad, although all the surviving examples don't necessarily have that. They delete the dovetail for the optic and just go for a flat receiver. The fore end appears to still be wood, but the buttstock is now some sort of phenolic resin, bakelite type plastic shell that's foam filled. And if you look, we'll link to Springfield Armory's catalogue, and if you look at the pictures, you'll see the paint's kind of flaked off quite readily from that material. They're trying to make it lighter because this is a bit of a chunk, not excessive for its capability. Lighter than an M32. 6-shot launcher, but you've only got 3 shots. But they're trying to lighten it up. The clip system is either made cheaper or otherwise simply changed. It's more of a block. It doesn't have these kind of flutes in it. So trials, we have the 3 weapons tested at Bradley Fields. The pistol, surprise, surprise, shock horror, is deemed too inaccurate and too awkward to handle. Who would have thought? Interestingly, the 3-shot gun is recorded as having a varying muzzle velocity shot to shot. And I'm not entirely sure why that would necessarily be the case, but that's what they record, and that's deemed to be a problem for it. Now, when they say shot to shot accuracy, and we've just been brainstorming why that would be off camera, it's actually fairly obvious if you think about it. So we've got these 3 fairly hefty rounds. We start all the way over here, and we're kind of compensating a bit like you do with a Sten gun or something, although it's not really a problem, for the offset weight. You fire the first round, it clunks to the middle, suddenly we're balanced, but we're going to get a different point of impact, point of aim, point of impact potentially just from that. And then on the final shot, it is imbalanced to the right side, but much less than it was when it was on the left side. So you're changing the balance of the lateral balance of the weapon shot to shot, and that is really the key reason. Well, at the time anyway, who knows how successful it would have been if they pressed ahead with that. The key reason why they abandoned this thing. There are a few more comments on this as well. So it's bulky, but also deemed fragile. So it's kind of the worst of both worlds, really. If you're happy if something is bulky and heavy, if it's also robust and reliable, but this thing is kind of the worst of both of those. This action is too open to the elements. You think of the M79, it's nice and sealed when it's closed. You open it up, close it with a round in, you carry it around with a round in, you're fine. You carry this around loaded, everything's exposed. You get some mud on this, it's going to potentially bind up. Bearing in mind how marginal the spring tension is now, or got past marginal, it would have been marginal at the time. You'd have to keep this whole thing clean. Any amount of dirt, sand, grit in here is going to impede the action of this, or the automatic action of this. You could, of course, give it a slap to assist it through, but that's hardly ideal for a frontline weapon system. Apparently the Navy SEALs looked at one of these, experimented with one in Vietnam, but never, I believe, carried it on any patrols or anything. I did find one photo of Army Rangers pictured with this, whether that was just a, informal plinking in the jungle, or they actually used these on any kind of operation, I don't know, but I would suspect not. This is in Vietnam, so these guys are digging this thing out of mothballs by that point, or someone at the Ordnance Department has decided to ship some out to test out. We already have the M79 well established by then. This is contemporary with the China Lake pump action, so I guess they're trying out different options, maybe in response to Ranger and MACV-SOG feedback on the China Lake not being ideal. Maybe they reverted to this to see if this was worth picking back up. So the XM79 is sort of pushed ahead, but this thing remains in development. The E2 emerges in 1960, but then in the same year, or by the end of the year, the E1 and the E2 are sort of mothballed. They do bring them back out of mothballs for testing again in 63, interestingly, including a mounted version on a vehicle. So they're not convinced that this thing is dead at that point, but that's kind of the last we hear of it in the records from Springfield Armory, until it seems to come back briefly in Vietnam, but doesn't get any traction. I only found, if anyone else finds more, let me know, but I found one other photo, and that was with an air cavalry guy, 1966. So limited issue there in the Vietnam time frame, well after this thing is kind of dead. And this is where the XM79 comes in. In 1955, Rayle is concerned by these systems not living up to what they wanted. He's concerned about the awkwardness and poor accuracy of the 3-shot launcher, so he rebuilds the worn-out test launcher as a break-open design. And that's where we get the XM79 from, and really, the rest is history. So, this is almost the story of the M79. It's just so lightweight, portable, reliable, robust, and the round is so sound that even weapons using the same cartridge have not been able to eclipse that very simple 1950s design. We, of course, know it from pop culture, Terminator 2, all sorts of other movies and games. But it's kind of nice that, as is often the case, somebody has spotted this in the realm of fiction and has incorporated it into their video game. As I guess a bit of variety. You could have put a sci-fi M79 in the game, but instead they've gone for something that's actually a throwback to the 50s, but very few people know about, that seems like it could have been invented in the future. And that's one of the draws for me of this vintage experimental stuff, is it still seems futuristic sometimes. Even though, in a way, it's quite mechanical and clunky, and really wasn't very successful. And the M79 proved the way to go, followed by, or in parallel with, the M203 and modern systems like the M320. And then we're circling back to this multi-shot idea with the precision grenadier system, involving multiple companies at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see if the multi-shot grenade launcher comes back to the infantry squad after half a century of trying. Thanks for watching. Please do like and subscribe if you're not already. That always helps. Do check out our website, our social media channels. And for those of you in the UK, or perhaps even visiting, please do come and join us for our Medieval Easter event here in Leeds. There'll be all sorts going on, including combat demonstrations. And I'm sure that will be a fun time for everyone that can make it to that one. But whatever else you do, guys, please do join us again here for What's This Weapon next week.